Hey everyone, Tin Man here, back with a daily jail update for Dota Underlords, and today all of the premier damage dealers, the Hunters and the Assassins, are all out of jail. They all avoided jail time today, so Hunter and Assassin builds are definitely going to be very prominent today. They typically were pretty good at evading and being unaffected by jails at all, but with all of them out and all of them free, you're definitely going to see a lot of Hunters and Assassins being played. Now, Crystal Maiden is jailed, the other big damage-dealing alliance, the Mages, definitely suffers from a lack of Crystal Maiden, but I kind of thought they would suffer a lot the other day, just yesterday, from a lack of Lich, Dragon Knight, as well as Timbersaw kind of putting a damper on Scrappies, and definitely saw less Scrappies, but I did see a lot of players still trying to play 3 or even 6 mages without Lich, without Dragon Knight, generally relying on Keeper of the Light and often Morphling as kind of big damage dealers. So I'm a little bit less skeptical of mages, even without Crystal Maiden out. You might see less 6 mage builds, but you can probably go for a lot more 3 mage builds. I know I saw a really successful one in a couple of the tournaments that I was casting with Keeper of the Light, Lina, and Razor, and then you kind of use those 3 mages in with a Primordial build. And with Razor's recent buff, he definitely does a lot of damage in the early and mid game. You can also do little variations on that where you take out one of them to put in a Puck and Dragon Knight, as well as other options. So definitely be open to the possibilities of 3 mage builds, even if it doesn't involve Crystal Maiden, rather. Keeper of the Light, Lina, Razor, Puck, Lich. Those are all really good mages, those other 5. You just might want to avoid going up to 6 if you have something else to pair it with. Other than that, we've got Magnus out, which hurts Brutes a little bit. He definitely is a pretty good early game unit for Brutes, but generally you don't, he's like the least impactful in terms of other synergies along with Axe. Generally, as long as you've got Lifestealer and Doom, that's a good core of Brutes to build around. And even if you don't have a Magnus here, you can still definitely try to play some Brutes, especially in the early and mid game when they're very, very powerful. So I wouldn't worry too terribly much about that. Techies being out definitely hurts the late game of Scrappies and Inventors. You can still definitely play 3-star Clockwork, Timbersaw, and Tinker, but you definitely fall off and don't get that really good late game transition if you're playing like a Scrappy Mages. So definitely be wary of that if you do go that direction. It might be powerful in the mid game, but it might struggle in the late game even if you get some of those 3-star units. You see Tiny gone, and that's a big hit to a lot of early game compositions that want to build up for the 3 warriors. So the early game warrior builds are going to be lacking, so you might want to be focusing a bit more on druids or perhaps brutes in the early game, and then a little bit less on warriors if you can't find Tiny to complete that 3 warrior alliance. He also definitely hurts primordial builds, and I know I've seen a lot of primordial builds recently that give up to 6 primordials. That being said, Tiny is probably one of the less impactful ones in that kind of build late game. It's 6 primordials can definitely exist much better without Tiny than they could without, say, Arc Warden or without Enigma, or even without Faceless Void. Those 3 are kind of a bit more important to those late game primordial builds, and Tiny loss will definitely hurt, but it won't kill those builds entirely. Other than that, we've got Bristleback, who is going to push you away from Savage builds, especially in the late game. His consistent damage output is really a good hallmark of what Bristleback does, so without that, you might want to stay away from Savages. Lone Druid is still very good. Venomancer is still pretty good in the early game, but you won't have quite as much late game sustained output other than with like a Lone Druid, so you might not have too much to pair it with. So maybe dial back a little bit on Savages. Other than that, Luna, Viper, and Shadow Fiend are units that I haven't really found too much use for. I don't think they're very popular to be played right now, at least not in the lobbies that I'm playing. And so I think the loss of them is not really going to affect the meta too terribly much. Knights just haven't really made a big impact on the meta. Viper probably pushes you down the tier list. Instead of using Viper to complete a Dragon synergy, you have to go with Dragon Knight, and maybe that hampers the assembling of a scaled alliance if you really wanted to do that. But even that was kind of a corner case. But maybe with the upswing of mages, maybe that it's felt a little bit more. And Shadow Fiend has just been struggling to find a place even after the demon adjustment. He just takes really long time to channel, and outside of the mid game, warlocks are pretty lackluster. So good luck in your games today. I hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you tomorrow.